Okay. Yeah, you see, the thing about it is that hope springs as ridiculously eternal as life itself. And here it is, Friday night, and it's a preparation, it's a yeast cake, it's an insane, probably, no, on the other hand, I'll tell you, sometimes you do things that are so fantastically uncool, you don't know, well, of course, it's like taking a hold of a key, you walk up to this lock and you put it into the thing and you turn it, and then you should never have done it. It's the uncool. I don't know how, it's, because it has nothing to do with being hip. It's a matter of being uncool, which is very different, It's very different. I think it all stems back to the problem that it is a constant sense we are dogged with the sound of little yapping dogs behind us, yipping and barking and biting at our hocks, the hounds of hell, are continually telling us that it should have been better. There was a time when guys accepted this, though. Now, many guys figure that the reason it isn't better is because there's a lot of rotten people that are contriving to make it rotten. But no, you see, it's the way it is. It's like this time. Now, it's all right. So just be calm. Now, it's Friday. It's going to be all right now. It's like this time I go to this banquet. It's all right, Eddie. Voices of Spring is the first one. Now, you just don't listen to her. She doesn't know at all. She was talking to those people, so let me handle it. Now, I remember one time I go to this banquet, see, and I'm sitting next to this woman. It's a very official banquet. And when I'm at a thing like that, I'm definitely on my guard, as is most of the people, in fact, are most of the people in Western civilization. We love rituals, and it's very ritualistic. And it is a banquet that has a podium. And I'm sitting at the podium there. Now, this is in a city which is distant. Isn't that interesting? They're more interested in that than they are in the program. It's fascinating. People get all hung up on hubcaps and forget the cars. They always do. That's why Detroit is selling hubcaps today. It's given up on cars. And, in fact, the movies are selling color. They've given up on pictures. They're selling promotion. They've given up on motivation. It's another thing. Anyway, I'm sitting on this podium. Now, this is a story which I have never told, and I don't want anyone to mention this because the names, well, I'll have to say that I'm going to protect everything, the innocent and all that and the guilty and everything. I'm sitting on the podium exactly 1 year ago in a city in a foreign country. And I'm on a platform, and there are about maybe 100 people on this platform. It was a fantastically official thing with the Opera Society there, the ladies with the hats with the big flowers sticking out of the top. And I am playing it very cool. And I am sitting next to a lady who seemed to be made out of pure, like lighter flints. She was very, very sharp around the edges and very official lady. And I'm sitting there next to her, and we're talking about the celery. And we're talking about the blue cheese. And once in a while, hello, Dad. Once in a while, we talk about things of that nature. And all the while, she is sitting, a middle-aged lady, remember this, and she is of the kind of lady that you see, on the society pages of the New York Times, where they have this thing, tea to be given for Lost Dalmatian Society, that kind of thing. And it says, a roller skating tea will be given by the Debutante Society of Upper Westchester. And it shows four ladies sitting in the Four Seasons. Now, you know that they're going to have the big thing. They're going to rent the tuxedos. The guys are going to all get all dressed up, and they're going to ride around the rented Cadillacs. It's going to cost them $84 a ticket, and it's going to be a big thing. They're going to get a snoot full of champagne, drink a lot of caviar, and whoop and holler until 4 o'clock in the morning. And the Society for Lost Dalmatians will realize $13. See, the point about charities is not to give people stuff, but to have events. You learn about that. It's much more important. Nobody knows how many dollars those lovely little debutantes with the brushed hair that you always see on the society page. No one knows how many dollars they got for the White Russian Relief Fund or this. It's a big fet, It's a ritual. It's a tribal thing. Well, I'm involved in one of these tribal deals, and I'm sitting there next to this lady. Now, you got the scene. I am playing it absolutely straight. I don't know how to act under a condition like this. Do you laugh at the rotten jokes that the speaker is saying? Or do what do you do? You see, I'm sitting there and I'm eating this soup, and I'm supposed to talk in a couple of minutes. I don't know. None of these people know anything about me. Then what I'm going to talk. I don't know what the society is. But one thing I began to notice, this lady sitting next to me seemed to be excessively interested in, I don't know what the drink was, the native drink they had there. It wasn't exactly like fruit punch because it kept burning a hole in my tie. It was a very interesting kind of drink, and it tasted like battery acid with cherry juice in it. And it was a very interesting thing. It kept discoloring my eyeballs. I'd drink a little bit of it, and she apparently thought it was very good. And once in a while she would speak to me in very cultured, very good, isn't it? I'd say, yes, it's very good. The celery is very good here today, and this is an interesting society. And I'm sitting there, and about 5 minutes later, I began to notice something very interesting was happening. This lady was no longer made out of lighter flints. She appeared to be made out of silly putty. She was getting soft around the edges, and a very odd thing was happening. Her knee kept hitting my knee. Well, now, this was kind of nice at first. At first I thought it was just because there was a heavy wind in this place. And that happens a lot of times. And the floor was kind of bouncing and buckling a little there. It was a very old building. It was like from the 12th century. And she kept hitting me on the knee. Well, after a while, she stopped hitting me on the knee, and she just stayed on the knee there for a while. Well, I was halfway through the turtle soup. And by this time, I said, this old doll here is getting pretty aggressive. And it's funny, when they're getting aggressive in a foreign language, it's very difficult to understand. Well, you don't know how to handle a situation down the village. You know which way to go. I'm pretty good going to my right, but this chick was sitting on my left, and she was on my bad side and everything, So I'm sitting there, and she kept hitting my knee. Well, she stopped hitting my knee, and the next thing I know, she puts her hand over on my arm. Well, now, this is a difficult way to eat lunch, especially when the mayor is up giving a talk, and the mayor is her husband. And she's got her hand on my arm there, and she's sort of leaning over towards me now. She's beginning to tilt, and it began to develop into a very, very sticky, rotten situation. Well, then the mayor is giving a talk, and he looks down, and he sees the old doll leaning. And he is a mayor, by the way, of a very important city in the Western Hemisphere. He finished talking, and he sat down, drank a couple of slugs of this native juice, got up and walked over back of me, and then he leaned over on my right side. I figured, it's going to be a message of official statedom. Have you ever wondered what people talk about on the podium when you see it in the newsreel? The newsreels were going. He leans down over my shoulder, whispers into my right ear, he says, "She's not worth it." Yes, that's very good. Yeah. Then he leans down once again. He says, "You're heading for trouble." And he nods at the newsreel cameraman. He shakes my hand, shakes the hand of the guy next to me, who happened to be the prime minister or something, shook his hand, moved on down to the head of the committee, and before I knew what happened, we were involved. Yeah, there you go. We were involved. No, Eddie, stop it. I told you, voices of spring, and you come up with that. Crying out loud. See, all the hogwash and the commotion in there, and they booed it again. And you know I told you, Dad? On and on and on and on it goes like this. Man is always getting confused whether he's got the sling on his rifle, whether he's got the thing washed and cleaned, whether he's got his leggings on, and somebody's shooting a BAR at him from his blind spot. And he's never there to see it. Oh, yes. Life, time, tide, it all springs eternal. Oh, by George. Just hold it there now. There you have hope springs eternal in the human breast. Well, now I'll tell you what happened to me, if you want me to level with you about that Friday night soiree. The minute this clown leaned over my shoulder and said she's not worth it, I was driven by an insanely... an incontrovertible impulse to find out whether it was true or not. Up to that point, I was trying to run. After that one phrase, that crummy hope business. Well, it all fizzled out like everything else in life does. We sort of stood around, and cars came up, and it started to rain. People talked. Someone put up a poster. Some guys shook hands. Another guy came around with some hors d'oeuvres 15 minutes after the lunch. We stood around again. Somebody opened the door, and the next thing I knew, I was in a streetcar. And now here I am, back in reality. It's like the time I'm at the Waldorf, one of the few times I'm at the Waldorf, and a guy in a dress suit got up in the middle of a very official luncheon, and he says, "This is a crock up." Very loudly he said it. Great nuts. And we'll be here until it's getting pretty late, as a matter of fact. You know, I'll tell you, it's getting late for all of us in a lot of ways. Then on the other hand, it's a little too early. Have you ever had the suspicion that just about the time you're getting hip to what's going on, it isn't really worth it? That there's nothing going on? You know, if somehow we could keep the mystery, I suspect there's far too much communication between us now. I really believe this. I believe that when there was a day when nobody could say anything to anybody else. You know, I hold it exactly the opposite of what Salinger says, in case any of you are interested in my idiotic views on the subject. And it is not that mankind cannot communicate. It is that mankind communicates too ridiculously well. I'll tell you this, that the day that they discover total communication will be the day that man will be driven to kill everybody. Because you know as well as I do, if you could understand that clown sitting next to you completely, you'd have to kill him. You'd have to. Oh, that confuses girls. They don't quite understand that concept. Well, that's because you're not a man, which confuses your thinking in many ways. Speaking of confused thinking, this is WOR, AM and FM, New York. And let's get on with the things here. Now, there are certain things that happen to men. Oh, this is not an anti-woman show in any sense of the word. That's one of my problems. It's all right, Ted. I made the station break. Okay? What I would like to do here at this point, however, men are subjected to, or because of the way the world is, maybe they subject themselves to it themselves, to a variety of experience that women never quite experience. Now, I will describe one such experience immediately after the commercials, which leads, you know, you can only take two views. You take really two views of life. Either you get all hung up and really take it seriously, or you can take it seriously and not get hung up, and you have only one alternative, and that is to laugh. You just have to laugh at it. You can't possibly do anything else. Now, more and more, the ego school of writing has led people into believing that if they are serious enough about it, they will solve the problem, whatever the problem is, like being bugged. No, forget it. It is my experience that being bugged is part of the whole scheme, the whole system. I don't know whether or not there were guys, because, you know, we don't know. Nobody was writing for the proletariat in the times of Egypt. And I'm sure there were plenty of guys lugging rocks up the side of pyramids who were bugged. Not just because they were lugging rocks, just because they were alive. You know, being alive is enough to bug people because of the nature of being alive. Yeah, we're the only creature who knows there's an end. And so it bugs us. We want to it's like going to a gigantic show and the plot is bad. You know, really, it's like going to some enormous, fantastic event and it turns out to be a bust of the worst type. Yeah, our hopes are far higher than what we have, always. This has led many guys to go on the mescaline kick. It's led guys to LSD-5, pot, whoopee parties, fist fights, any number of things, you see, trying to make the scene work. And all you get is a fantastic head after a while. You sit around, you scratch. Guys put records on the player, and they try to figure out whether it's going to work that way. It's a very complicated problem being alive. It's just not so, it cannot be reduced to cut and dried rules. Now, immediately after, if you will hang on, we got these commercials. One of them is a paper book gallery. And if you're going to make the village scene this week, by all means, go down to the paper book gallery and buy 6 wild records for $2. Only if you're a listener. You have to identify yourself, literally, and this is true. This is their 5th anniversary. And if you are going to make the scene in the village, it's at 399 6th Avenue, just off 8th Street, right next to the Howard Johnson. There's a tunnel underneath it, too. And it ain't only flavors they're selling. This is the village, You just got to tell you when you're in Rome, you do a lot of things that the Romans do. And they've got one flavor of ice cream in that Howard Johnson's they don't advertise. It's for the very hip people. And they can tell whether you are. It's a look in the eye. This is 399 6th Avenue, just all the innocent people looking at me. They don't know what it is. It's not Raisin Rum. 399 6th Avenue, just off 8th Street. The Paper Book Gallery, please, believe me, go down there and ask them about it. The records. That's 6 for $2 or 77 cents each. Now, we have another thing here. Great Shanghai. It's up on Broadway, and it's also operated by the Mandarin House people. But this is Shanghai food, which is different from Mandarin, different from Cantonese. It's also different from Szechuan, which is Central Chinese, which is made mostly of swamp water and little leaves and fish heads. You'll enjoy it particularly. No. Shanghai food is more like whipped cream and strawberries and hot dogs and stuff, taffy apples and things. You'll find this at the Great Shanghai, which is at 102nd, between 102nd and 103rd, right up in the middle of the Whoopee district on Broadway. And that is a wildly swinging neighborhood. That's like an enormous cake of yeast up there. You'll be very glad to get inside the doors when you get up there. You'll run in there and breathe a sigh of relief. They'll pull you in. You'll knock down a couple of fast ones, sit down and order some, whatever it is. They've got all that stuff. It comes in bowls, Very, very mysterious, the Orientals. Speaking of the Orientals, I heard from Mrs. Kuo tonight, Emily, who came from China in 1947, that the first thing she recognized about Caucasians, North American white people, is that they all looked alike. That's a fact. She says she couldn't tell one from the other. And she says even to this day she can't. She says, you all look alike. She says, how can you tell when all the people's eyes droop? You can't tell. It's very... That's what she said. Man, what are you going to do? You do the best you can. Let's see. We have here American Heritage also. And believe me, I insist that you send $1 to American Heritage. That's little enough to pay for heritage. Little enough to pay for an entire tradition. In Europe, it's cost them a lot more than that, like 47 million people in 2.5 years. They just kill them, put them in ovens and stuff. That's how their heritage works. All you have to do is send $1 to American Heritage, WOR, New York, New York, and they will send you a copy of the American Heritage, a representative copy. It's a 1939 copy. It's very representative. It's all part of history. And let's see. Oh, that's it. Now, I'm going to tell you how it is difficult. Please bring me some Hope Springs Eternal music, please. Only man could have written this. Believe me, no camel would have had the guts. Can't you just see little flowers springing out of the hair of the girl who's selling the Salems in the Salem cigarettes? It's spring once again. Hope springs eternal in the human breast. In spite of all those bronchial troubles, as they call it, in Hammond, Indiana. And the more you inhale, the more it gets you. And the more that spring flows down there deep in your veins. Come on, all the way up, Eddie. Come on, like Bernstein would do it. There. Just make it loud and soupy, and they'll love it. All right. Enough dross there for a while. Now, that's Hope Springs Eternal in the human breast. And by way of a preface, I have a significant article here that I wish to read to you. Once in a while, one of the old dames does get wise to what it's about. And then you have trouble. As a matter of fact, have any of you ever taken a transatlantic flight? Well, you've heard a lot of advertisements, advertisements and talk and commercials about how it is almost like paradise to get on a transatlantic flight. The minute you get on this flight, you're in Japan, and the little girl comes around with a lute, and they start throwing grapes in the air, and people start blowing flugelhorns, and they bring out the mead and the ambrosia, and they give you the togas, and they turn the lights out, and it's a special service. And all the way, it's a fantastic orgy that goes all the way to wherever it is. You've heard about this? Well, I've gone on about 25 of those transatlantic flights, and after about 15 minutes of them, you generally feel sick because of all the stuff they keep stuffing in you. How many martinis and cookies can you have together? And yes, it gets very sick-making, and after a while, you're 45,000 feet in the air, and the thing is humming, and little kids are hollering and using those paper cups, and sometimes not. And it's not quite the way you hear, it's really not exactly the same. And I'll never forget the time I was in this transatlantic flight one time when two French vampire jets, high over someplace, I don't know where it was, it might have been Algeria or someplace. Yes, it was, as a matter of fact, Algeria. High over Algeria, two vampire jets came out of the sun. And it was just like the old days, I saw these two guys borne down, two vampire jets out of the sun. And I saw them, and there were a lot of little old ladies sitting around me. And I looked down, and I said, gee, and next thing I know, I'm burrowing under the floor like the old days again, and I'm reaching for all kinds of oxygen masks and everything, and I'm hollering. I want to get on the intercom and holler, here they come, 7 o'clock, for God's sakes, hey! These two guys go past over our port wing, two vampires. And the plane rocked. And I could see this captain up there sweating it out, and they're unloading the 50s. They're getting all ready with the flares and stuff, and everybody kept sitting around eating chocolates and drinking champagne. And I could see these two guys way down below us regrouping. And, this time they weren't going to miss, and they came up directly at us. I could see them coming up directly at us from about, maybe 6,000 feet. They went all the way down. We were flying at about 39,000. They were down about 6,000 feet, and they came directly at us at a supersonic speed. They were the latest vampires. I see them coming. I figured we'd had it this time. And they split just as they arrived under, one on each side. They were just letting us know we were over Algeria. And we looked down, we could see a lot of fires and people running around in the woods, hiding and digging holes in the sand. And I figured, well, they don't advertise this part of these flights. It's very exciting. Well, I have a little more of that music, please. We're going to bring the people back. We can all sing this. Come on, it's a song. Voices of spring, hope springs eternal. Did you read this little note from the United Press International from Washington, Dateline, Washington, UPI? Listen carefully. You've heard about these movies they show in the airlines, the planes? Well, maybe this one got past you. You should know. There are signs that there is some sanity returning to our world. Starting May 1st, TWA has decided to integrate its in-flight movies. Now, you realize that they were not integrated before, don't you? The only people who saw the movies were the first-class passengers. They sit up in the front of the plane. The rest of them, the hoi polloi, the rabble, sit in the back by the tail. Now, there are a lot of things that happen to first-class passengers, like when an airplane crashes, they get killed first. Usually, it's much more dangerous than to sit in the front of the plane than the back. Are you aware of that? That whenever there's any guy saved, he's in the tail there where it bumps all the time. And if possible, he'll get saved if he's in the John. About 3 times last year, guys got saved who were in the John. They locked themselves in. Yeah, that's the truth. Because you always see that tail sticking up, when the plane, that's where you got it. It's the only piece you can recognize. And there's some guy locked in there, and there's a whole line of people banging, and it's too late. He's the one that... Well, of course, there's a lot of problems with that, too, but we'll go into that later when the show gets off the air. That gets pretty complicated. I don't know if they've ever been a plane, but nevertheless, that that they're integrated, you see. And they have a little curtain that they pull down between the first-class passengers and the second-class passengers. It goes right in between. And you can hear all the babies crying in the back. That's the second class crowd. You have babies crying and guys swearing in Croatian. And, it's like steerage back then. You can smell salami sandwiches and, it's awful. You get the terrible unwashed peasants back there. And, of course, we're sitting up in the front there with the champagne and whooping it up. And it is natural, of course, that the people in the front are the only people who are really saved when, the parachutes are handed out. It's first class. It's like the Titanic went down and all. It's very, very good. And then many guys will give their first class seat up to a little old lady in the back, and that will, there's still a lot of humility and gentility and chivalry in our world. However, when the movies start, it is strictly integrated. And they run the curtain, and they turn off the lights in the front, and they turn this movie, and the people in the back can hear the sound. Just a little bit coming through the curtain. And then they hear all the people up there laughing it up. And all they've got in the back are those cups, that say, in case of emergency, use this cup. And that's all they've got to amuse themselves. And up in front, they're watching a lot of stuff. And so here's what happened the other day. Starting May 1st, TWA will show the films to the coach as well as the first-class passengers on transatlantic flights. For the past 18 months, the airline has limited the showings to first-class passengers, a decision enormously popular with first-class passengers, but one which brought many complaints from the coach section. Well, you know how the unwashed are. They don't often, I say most people don't know their place. I say people should know their place more. It's a much happier world of people if they know their place. Don't you agree with me? You don't? Well, that means you don't know your place, in which case you're one of the reasons why the world is in turmoil. I really do. I think that people should learn their place. And by George, when you're told to tote the bale and lift that bar, you better do it, because makes it much happier for all the rest of us. We're not toting bars and lifting bales. And I just believe in people knowing their place. Don't you, friends? Come on now, I'm talking to all you Barry Goldwater fans out there, and you should all be warming to this. This is good, solid Barry Goldwater talk. All of you Ayn Rand fans should know that you can recognize the basic truth of that. Of course you do. Well, getting out with this. To keep the people, that is the coach passengers, from seeing the films, cabin attendants had made sure the folding door separating the first class from the coach always was closed during the movie. But on one recent flight, will you please bring a little more Hope Springs Eternal music, because this is the point. On one recent flight, an elderly woman passenger traveling second-class coach kept opening the door wide so that she could see the film. The purser politely explained to her that the movies were only for the first class, please, madam. The lady only snorted, and as the flight attendant walked away, opened the door again. He closed it. She opened it. Finally, he stood by the door and held it closed, while Doris Day went into action on the beaded screen. The old doll then, in the second-class part, got down on her knees, put her face under the small open space between the door bottom and the cabin floor, and bit the purser on the leg, and refused to let him go. She had store teeth that were very sharp. She hung on, and for 15 minutes they flew like that. The purser, with this upper and this lower plate buried in the calf of his leg, the old doll hanging on the other side of the doorway, and Doris Day is in action on the screen. Gee, they don't advertise that kind of stuff on those transatlantic flights, and it sure adds a lot. I mean, it really does. It's a lot more fun than those cold cuts they serve and all that beer and all that stuff. Well, the entire system collapsed on that flight. They opened the door, the old lady sat back, they gave her some hors d'oeuvres, and the second-class passengers for the first time watched the movie. Now, the point that I am making here is that all these people had gotten on this plane and they were going to fly across the ocean. Now, I'm sure that every one of us, particularly those of you who have never done this, have a beautiful, almost paradisical vision of you getting on the plane and flying to Paris. Haven't you really? Oh, come on now, come on, level. You know that. I mean, you got this matched luggage and the whole bit, and you're drinking champagne and you're speaking fluent French to the sinister stranger sitting next to you. You know, the whole thing is going on and on. You do. Let's face it, Americans have a paradisical view of the world. We really do. We go to a crummy little rotten fishing village on the coast of Italy, and we come back and rave for weeks. And it's a crummy little rotten fishing village, and everything is rotten. The sewage is rotten, and everything is rotten. The people are fist fighting and sticking each other with knives, and all we know is they make wonderful beadwork. And they're so happy. You should have heard the wonderful guitar player. I heard one. You know, it's all jazz for the birds. And we have this wonderful image. And I suspect it's because we live in a world that is almost totally showbiz. We are sold things. Believe it or not, we're probably the only country in the world where other continents are packaged and sold to us. Go to beautiful Australia. Yes, and Australia is presented to you like a box of Barasini cherries. You're told that a fun continent, Antarctica, and exciting new vistas to explore. And, we're sold. We sell each other till a point has been reached where even death itself is a saleable item. Are you aware of that? Do you know that there's an outfit out on Long Island now that has a 30-day death policy, a 30-day trial you can run it on? Yeah, it's a free trial. For 30 days you can try this life insurance. I don't know. I don't know how you're going to try it 30 days, but that's what do you do? I mean, if it doesn't work out, there's a lot of complications when you think of that. But everything is packaged. Well, even war itself is packaged to Americans. Oh, yes, it is. It is packaged because I don't think there's anybody who watches more war movies, who digs more violent television shows than the Americans. And it's kind of clean. When one of these guys drills another guy on the main street of Laredo, you don't really see all that stuff splattered over that tavern in the back there. You just don't see what happens when that 45 slug goes out the back. You don't even see it when it goes in the front. It's all so clean. You know what I mean? It's packaged. It's kind of romantic. In fact, you kind of feel vaguely cheated that you didn't get plugged. Because you can think of how you'd lay, how you'd throw your one arm up, and you can see yourself lying there in a very dramatic way. Well, it's very, very, very unreal. Our attitude is about these things. And even, of course, it's part, you get into the Army, and you hope to see somebody like Gregory Peck as your CO. There's a little short, fat dentist, who's operating the controls there, and he's a cretin, almost totally illiterate, and he has stomach trouble. And, you don't feel the same way about it. Well, I'll tell you, probably one of the most educational experiences that I ever had, getting back to the thing that the men have experiences that women don't. I would like a woman to try to match this one. War. Okay, you got the scene? War. Now, war brings up a lot of images when I say the word. I'll just say the word again. War. Now, of course, you have all kinds of images. Some of them are good, too, like heroism. Oh, yeah. Men with a mission. We are climbing the hills to protect the world for democracy, or whatever it might be. Then, of course, there's the other side of it. But the other side you don't even know about. It's the in-between side where you really learn things from, because you never learn anything from the actual scenes of violence you see in war. You don't. Because, for one thing, they're too quick, too fast, too loud, and too many other things are happening for you to actually learn anything from them. You don't. It's like, do you learn anything from an automobile accident on the turnpike? Yeah, you don't. You really don't. You think you do, but you don't. So it's the in-between things. Let me describe the scene. War. Okay, I'm 17 years old. You got the scene now? I have seen Don Amici movies. I have seen Errol Flynn giving it to the Japs in Burma. All the old movies that you see on TV? Well, it's all the whole thing. It's war. You see, you're scared to go, and at the same time, there's a mission. It's a very complicated feeling that happens at the time when it really is going on. Now, you sitting here with no war going on, it seems very simple. Cut and run. I'd be against it. That's what you say. Not necessarily. On the other hand, you'd say, I'd be scared. Oh, boy, wow. Not necessarily. It's very complicated, I must say. So here it is, war. You got the scene? Now, I'm going in. There has been a lot of confusion, one thing and another. Next thing you know, I filled out some forms in a rash moment at school. And they told me that if I filled out these forms, it would be okay. I wouldn't have to go for a long time, and they'd send me to school, and oh boy, we go on. Well, I no sooner, it took me about 10 minutes to get home, and when I got home, the orders were already there. You see, all they wanted was that thing on the line there, and they got it. So I got home with this big fat envelope, and it says, go to this place. Well, immediately I felt very heroic. And people saying, you're going, and I'm 17 years old, I'm sort of half in a sweat, I'm not really shaving or anything yet, and I'm all excited and hollering, and I drank a glass of beer and everything. So the day came, and it said, go to this place on Franklin Street in Chicago. Now, I don't know whether this scene has ever been described in any story or book or magazine or article I've ever read about the war. This is the kind of thing where you really begin to have a feeling about what mankind is about. It's fantastic. You can understand why Swift wrote. So I arrived on Franklin Street, and I was thinking of all these images, you know, I'm going to come there and get examined, and they were going to swear me in. Well, now, when you hear the one phrase, when you hear swearing in, have you seen this ever done in the movies? Of course. It's very dramatic, isn't it? Well, let me tell you exactly how this happened. The first moment that the education began to build, I arrived on Franklin Street. Franklin Street is a street which is in the middle of the financial district of Chicago. It's right in the middle of the Loop. It's very official type business. It's like if you were told to arrive at 47th Street between 5th and 6th at rush hour. You know, it's that kind of a thing. So I arrived at Franklin Street, and there's a tall, thin building in between two other buildings, just a lot of buildings, and it's an office building. I arrive at this office building, and there is a slight mist coming down. It is raining. It is a gray day, and I am prepared for an event, like graduation, a ceremony, something official. I was going to become changed. It was historical. Well, I arrive at this building, and there's a line of guys coming out of the front of the building. I've got my papers. I figure they're waiting for me. They expect me there. And immediately, I walk up to the front of the building. All these guys are waiting. There's a line. I walk past the line. I go in through the doorway. There's a yellow light bulb hanging there. And there's a guy sitting at a desk. He said, where are you going? I said, well, I have papers here. They're expecting me. You got orders? I said, yes, orders. I gave him my orders. He said, get in the end of the line. And here, take these papers with you, and boom, 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 boom. He starts stamping my papers. He tears 6 of the sheets off, stamps 4 down, puts staples on, and I get down to the end of the line, and it's raining. I'm now standing out on the street. I mean, Errol Flynn is nowhere in sight. And it's coming down, it's drifting. And there's a bunch of other guys who are saying, this is not the draft board or anything like that. If you think you've been to the draft, this is not the draft board. This is an induction center. You are about to be put in. Well, the line is moving imperceptibly. And there's a big, tall, red-headed hillbilly standing right directly in front of me, and he's been drinking corn liquor. And he keeps falling up against the side of the building and swearing. And once in a while, he hits the guy ahead of him, who's a little short guy who looked like an accountant. And he keeps hitting him between the shoulder blades. Yeah, son of a... Pow! He hits him. Well, the little guy doesn't know what he keeps turning around, you know, and he's scared. And then every once in a while he'd turn around and he'd make a swing at me. Well, because I was facing him, I could see it coming, so I just keep ducking all the time. It swings. He hits the building. This goes on. Slowly we're moving, and finally we get inside the building. And I will describe the scene for you. The line, this building was 14 stories tall. The line wound up all 14 stories inside, in and out of rooms, in and out of rooms, in and out of hallways, in and out of elevator shafts, in and out of broom closets, in and out of cellars, places where they had old burlap bags, up and down, the line wound, and the line gradually changed complexion, until at one point the line was totally naked. Now, if you can imagine a line of men 17 and a half miles long, jaybird naked, all standing in the long corridors and up and down the air shafts, in and out of the elevator wells, a line of jaybird naked men with the rain coming down outside. Not one of these guys knows any of the other guys, and they're all shapes, all sizes, all ages, all conditions and everything, all lined up. I don't know many women going through this much. Quite this way. Quite this way. You see, what by quite this way, I mean, we had all entered with an idea of some gigantic promise, something. I don't know what, it was exciting. And it's very peculiar. So we kept winding in and out of these rooms. And once in a while you'd come into a room and they would do something to you. The guy would say, give me your arm. And you'd give him your arm, and he'd look at it. Oh, give me the other one. And you'd give him the other one, and he'd stick something in you. Real fast, and it would make a ripping sound when he would do it. Oh, yeah, they had been sticking guys now for about 25 straight days, and this was a very old needle. And they would just, I'd chunk it in there. They'd squirt this ethyl or antifreeze or whatever is in you, and then pull it out again. And slowly but surely, you're getting sick from all this. And it is cold. The wind is coming up and down. And once in a while, a guy with a riding crop walks along, and he starts batting you. And get in the line. I pay you. Get out, the fat one. And he cracks you across the hocks. Gradually, you get closer and closer to what appears to be nirvana. You don't know. When you're waiting in line naked for something, you figure that at the end, something great is going to happen. It just has to be. And this line is filtering upward, and it filters down, you see. It curls on down the other side of the building. And gradually the guys are dressed down towards the other side. 14 straight hours you wait, gradually moving, until suddenly I found myself in a room with a lot of other guys, and we are now dressed. And two guys are talking up in front. One is a captain and one is a corporal or something. And the corporal says, "Hey, you guys, put your hands up." All of us put our hands up. And the corporal and the captain had a little talk. "Okay, you guys, you're in the Army. All right, you're in the Army. We have just sworn in. You know that wonderful swearing-in ceremony where Van Johnson talks and the guys cry? The thing where they play the Star-Spangled Banner? It's all over. We've just stood as you're in the Army. We didn't hear anything." And somebody says, "What about the oath?" And the corporal says, "The oath, you just heard it. Like, get the potatoes out of your ears, Mac." We didn't hear anything. None of us heard anything. We wanted something to happen, you know. Where is it? When does it go? When does the balloon go up? And we stood around. He says, "Get out. There's another bunch coming in." And they pushed us out the other end of the door. And another bunch of guys came in, didn't know what. And so one or two of us hollered, "Hey, they're going to give you the oath. Hey, follow the oath." And a couple of guys, you could see their eyes brighten a little bit. And then that mumbling started again up in the front. Gradually, we went down out on the street, and it's raining. And it's all over. All over. I am now in the Army. I'm one with Errol Flynn and Don Amici, the Rangers, the guys that took Dieppe.